Hello friends from around the world, it's World Bipolar Day. Can you believe it's already been 12 months since we were last here? It's Saturday the 30th of March 2024 and of course it's Easter weekend as well. So wherever you are, wherever you're tuned in from, wherever you're watching this from, I hope that you are well and you are also more than welcome. We are so happy to have you here and hello to all our friends from across the globe. So my name's Leah Charles-King. I'm a TV presenter and a proud ambassador for Bipolar UK, which is basically the reason why we're here. It's because of Bipolar UK, a wonderful charity that solely focuses on those who live with bipolar, like myself, or of course those who are affected with the condition. So for a whole week, in fact, Bipolar UK have decided to put on a great program of webinars and live discussions for you to take part in. If you have missed out on any of those, then you can go back and check out some of the playback links and you can catch up on whatever you have missed, okay? But today we have got a full program for you, lots to come, all right? So as I mentioned, my name's Leah Charles-King. I've been an ambassador for Bipolar UK now for a number of years, and this is my fourth time hosting the World Bipolar Day conference, which is actually the fourth one that Bipolar UK has done. And I hope that if you've been before, welcome back. And if you are brand new, again, you are more than welcome here with us. Now, today's agenda is very important. In fact, it's packed. We have got an update with the CEO and the deputy CEO of the charity. So we'll be finding out what the charity has been up to since we last saw you in 2023 and just letting you know what's coming up over the next 12 months and how you can support us as well. We'll also be having a very important discussion on bipolar in the workplace or bipolar and the workplace and navigating that. So many questions, it can be a bit of a minefield. So I'm definitely looking forward to that discussion. And also we'll be talking bipolar as well. We'll be talking about the importance of quick and correct diagnosis and also the ways that we can challenge stigma within our communities and society as a whole. Now, if you are in crisis, you're going through a tough time right now, if you're struggling and you need some help, Bipolar UK are here for you. At the bottom of the screen, you will see a little ticker tape, I call it, that has some important information. It's got some crisis numbers for you there, some ways that you can get in touch. You can also go to Bipolar UK's website, which is bipolaruk.org, and there is information pages there where you can find out more about bipolar as a condition, or you can find out how you can get some help and some support. If you're in crisis and you need to speak to somebody urgently, there are some emergency numbers for you there as well. The key thing is though, please don't suffer in silence. The quicker you get help, the quicker you could be back on the road to recovery. And I hold my hands up there because I'm someone who has been down that path myself, and yet here I am. So it wasn't easy, but the point is that there is life after diagnosis and there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel if we could just let it in. But I know that journey to get there could be really difficult. So just so you know, you're not alone. Bipolar UK is here to help you. You're certainly in the right place. Okay, so also on the website, you'll gain access as well to information about our peer support groups, which are fantastic. It's a great way of connecting with your own tribe, finding like-minded people like yourself, and also the e-community. So if you want advice or you have questions or anything that you want to input back into the community, then you can actually speak on there. You can speak as yourself or you can speak anonymously. It's completely up to you, but there are people there for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So never feel like you're going through it by yourself. All right, well, let's get going. So before we go into our first discussion, I want to introduce to you our CEO and Deputy CEO of Bipolar UK. They are here to give us a fantastic update on what's been going on in the last 12 months since we've seen you. What has Bipolar UK been up to? How has all the projects and the campaigns, what's come out of all of that? We want to know. And also what's going to be happening over the next 12 months and what are the plans and the campaigns that we could hopefully support. So in case you don't know, you've never met him before, where have you been? But Simon Kitchen, he is the CEO of Bipolar UK. He's been the CEO for about 6 years now. And he really did steer the charity through some choppy waters during COVID, I have to say. And we got through it. We're here. Also, he was the person who oversaw a lot of groundbreaking work for the Bipolar Commission, which I'm sure will be mentioned as well coming up. And Simon's first experience of bipolar was in his late teens when he supported a friend who had the condition, and his wife's late brother Kevin also lived with the condition as well. And then with Simon is Rosie Phillips. Now, Rosie is the Deputy CEO of Bipolar UK, and she's been with the charity since 2017. She manages all of the peer support services, which if you've ever tapped into them, they are incredible. It really is a lot of the heartbeat of the work that's done within Bipolar UK. And the peer support groups have been proven to just be life-changing for many. So if you feel like you could benefit from a peer support group, then you've definitely got to check that out. More information on bipolaruk.org, but I'm sure Rosie will tell you more as well. So she heads that up, and Rosie herself, she actually lives with bipolar, so she walks the walk, which is really, really important, and she lives well with the condition, as you will see yourself. So before I hand over to Simon and Rosie, let's say hello and hear some messages from just some of our friends from around the world.
My name's Simon Kitchen. I'm the Chief Exec of Bipolar UK. Just want to wish everyone an amazing World Bipolar Day. Bipolar is a really difficult condition, but there is so much good work going on in the world to improve the lives of people living with it. Much of it driven by people living with the condition itself. There are well over 40 million people living with bipolar across the world, and a further 200 million who are profoundly affected through close friends and family. If all of us were all in the same place together, we'd be the 6th largest country in the world. It's amazing to think what we could achieve if we all worked together to build a better world for people living with bipolar. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Hello from Canada. Today is World Bipolar Day. Mood Disorder Society of Canada is celebrating by sharing educational resources, personal stories, and more. You can find the links to our social media where we'll be sharing this at mbsc.ca. Remember that you are not alone and that your illness does not define you.
I'm Vijay Nalawala from Mumbai, India. Greetings to everybody on World Bipolar Day. We are all excited about our upcoming conference to mark the day where we see people coming in from all corners of the country. This is the 8th edition of our World Bipolar Day National Conference, and all gung-ho about it.
Happy World Bipolar Day from Australia. We blow bubbles for bipolar to bring awareness to the condition, as if the metaphor is for mania, going bubbly and high, and for depression, we go down and crashing. Have a good day.
Hello, my name is Duncan Odingo, and I am a mental health and a fitness enthusiast from Africa. I'm taking this opportunity to wish you a happy World Bipolar Day from Kenya.
Hi, I'm Jahanga Bart.
And I'm Melissa Duncan, and we're So Bipolar, a nonprofit organization that services the mental health community. On World Bipolar Day, we'll be celebrating by spreading awareness and the message of hope.
Hi everyone, from Paris. I'm Renaud Magne, president of the association Bipolarité France. It's a very exciting day because we are launching the French version of the application Mood Tracker from Bipolar UK. I wish you an amazing Bipolar World Day.
Happy World Bipolar Day. This year, Bipolar Scotland are inviting anyone living with bipolar in Scotland to share their stories of diagnosis with us. We're hoping to create a publicly accessible resource which really highlights the difficulties that people go through in achieving that all-important diagnosis.
Hello, a very warm welcome to World Bipolar Day. It's a number of we've been doing these virtual conferences for a number of years now, and it's fantastic to be able to connect with you all of you who are living with bipolar, and also with friends and family as well. As you know, I'm not personally living with bipolar, but I've been affected by it within my family, and also now for all of the friends and colleagues that I've made through the charity as well. And it's a great honour to be able to serve our community and to improve the lives of people living with bipolar. So what have we been doing over the last year? Well, those of you who joined us, I think it was probably 3 years ago now, we were kind of talking about the results. Well, we launched our Bipolar Commission, then we talked about the results of our Bipolar Commission. And that was a massive piece of work that we did with people living with bipolar to find out about what it was like to live with bipolar in the 21st century in the UK. And that was came back with some really interesting findings, some quite harrowing stats, but it really pinned down for us what we felt needed to happen to be able to help people with bipolar to live well. And it was two real crucial components to that. One was around diagnosis, the critical importance of people being able to know that they're living with bipolar. And the second part was specialist treatment and support to be able to give them the skills and the empowerment to be able to manage the condition well. And we've been doing loads of work over the last year to be able to take forward those two areas and those two recommendations. And I'm hopefully going to be joined very shortly by Rosie, there we go, Rosie. How you doing, Rosie?
Good, thank you.
Our Deputy CEO. So Rosie's going to be talking a little bit about our services that we provide here, what we've been doing over the last year and what our plans are going forward. But before we come on to Rosie, I would just like to let you know what we've been doing to be able to take forward some of those recommendations from the Bipolar Commission. Living with bipolar is a really difficult condition. You have to be an Olympic athlete just to be able to do the things that most people take for granted every day. So we know that you need someone who's going to be advocating on your behalf across the country and across the NHS and in workplaces to be able to help you get the support you need to be able to live well. So we've been doing lots over the last year to be able to take that forward. The crucial thing has been about raising awareness of bipolar and to be able to get concerted action on this horrendous delay in wait around diagnosis. It takes on average 9.5 years to get a bipolar diagnosis, and that's completely unnecessary. And we believe that that could be significantly shorter. It should be a matter of months, years at most, but certainly not 9.5 years. A lot of things have had to go wrong for that to be the case, and we're on the case to be able to change it. So what we've been doing is within our communities across the country, we've got an amazing partnership with Rotary. I think we're going to have a slide now just being brought up. So we're big believers in doing stuff, and I think it's a great way to inspire people. And also we know how important it is, especially people with bipolar, to exercise. It's really good for depression and so forth. So what we did over the last year was we launched a poll to poll. And the original plan was to be able to sign up groups all across the country to be able to walk from the North Pole to the South Pole. It's about 20,000 kilometers. So the hope was that we were going to be able to sign up groups, and we've had an amazing response thanks to Rotarians all across the country, which we're working in partnership with, but also from people from our wider bipolar community. We didn't just go around the world once, we went around twice. We've gone to the South Pole and back up again. We managed to do 40,000 miles. And a big part of that was myself, putting myself on the line And I did a walk, which was to raise awareness of bipolar in the northeast of England. So we had a GP awareness campaign that we were putting out in the GP surgeries across the region. And we wanted to see what we could do to try to boost that. So I committed to walking on the 20th of March. I started, so not it was only just 10 days ago, actually 9.5 days ago exactly. There is a connection there. And I walked from Durham all the way up to Bamborough. I was going to go up to Holy Island, but you probably might have seen me this morning. I was on BBC Breakfast Sofa talking about bipolar and the importance of diagnosis in terms of reducing the risk of suicide. But I was joined by two really amazing individuals, Jeremy Clark and Daisy Clark, his wife. And Jeremy's been living with bipolar, well, most of his life, but he's been a trustee of the charity for almost 10 years. And he really is a guru, someone I go to all the time to be able to talk about the condition, how to manage it well. And it's a real honor to be able to do that walk with him over the last 9 days. And I'm really pleased that Jeremy and Daisy managed to complete that walk just over the last few hours. They managed to get over onto Holy Island and to do the full 200 kilometers. So it was a real great honor to be able to do that with them. So I'm just going to put a little slideshow on, just showing you some of the things that we did on that walk. It was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of hard work as well. And my feet are very, very, very sore at the moment. But we met some amazing people, and we were talking to people about bipolar all along the route. And we were able to talk to lots of regional news and papers and radio, and maybe even get onto the TV. And I think it's by these little actions that we're able to get the message out about living well with bipolar and the importance of diagnosis. So hoping to do more of those over the next year. Today you might have seen lots of Rotaries, over 20 across the UK have been doing street stalls with our volunteers, and it's really fantastic to be able to get the message out there into local communities. But we know it's not just, we can't do this by ourselves, and we can raise awareness of bipolar and we can get more people to understand the condition, but the NHS needs to play a really important part in that. So over the last year, what we've been doing is doing an inside track, really big engagement with the NHS and through MPs in Parliament to be able to get the Department of Health and other areas of government to be able to take bipolar seriously. So we managed to engage with over 180 MPs. So a big thank you to all of you who are part of our MP writing campaign. And for the first time ever, the Suicide Prevention Fund, which is a big pot of money which came out to be able to reduce the risk of suicides in England. For the first time ever, they acknowledged the importance of bipolar, and I think they gave some really stark stats of bipolar and depression, and as mood disorders contributes to 41% of all the suicides in the UK, which is a horrendous stat. But at least now they're taking bipolar seriously as well. Really also delighted that our campaign has also been picked up by the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Psychiatrists is really important because they're the ones who provide the diagnosis for people with bipolar, and they're the ones on the front line within the NHS as well, so they know all about the constraints that are on that they're facing at the moment. And they've signed up now to our commitment to get the delay to diagnosis down to 5 years within the next 5 years. So that's something we're hoping to be able to take to all the political parties to get them to make a commitment, if not in the manifestos, and certainly in the next government as well. So really excited about that. Looking forward to the future, we think there's a huge future for research. That's really, really critical area for bipolar. It's not enough research going on in terms of cures and treatments. So what we've been doing is we've got a new research function which we've been building up over the last year with the wonderful Tanya and Talon. And we're now recruiting people to our own bipolar research network. So if you're interested, you could be someone living with bipolar, you might be pre-diagnosis, you might be a friend and family. Do go to our website and to be able to sign up as well. would really love it if you were able to do that. I'm going to hand over to Rosie, who's going to be talking about the amazing work that we've been doing in our services over the last year. Over to you, Rosie.
Thank you, Simon, and thanks to you and everybody who joined that walk, because I think it's an amazing achievement. So congratulations on completing it, and also for the money you've raised, and to our ambassadors that joined you on the launch. So fantastic stuff. So thank you for that. I just wanted to read a quote before I start, and that's valid. One of the people that responded to our evaluation said this, and I think it sums up some of the key work we do. And it said, "It validates my experiences, helps me feel less alone, and encourages me to talk about symptoms using the correct terminology and with greater understanding." And I think that's so key for our peer support. So just to go over a few bits, we've now over 80 groups up and running in support groups, which is fantastic. And these are sort of back up to pre-COVID numbers. And unfortunately, like a lot of organisations, we had to close the face-to-face provision at that point. But some fantastic stuff now, they're back open. And equally, we've got both digital version and in person, and we know they make a significant impact. So over 69% said by using our services, they are able to manage their condition better. And that again is a fantastic reflection and impact that our services are having. And some very important stats I thought were important to share. 39% said they had fewer thoughts of self-harm. And we also know that bipolar can bring suicidal thoughts. It can bring those thoughts of self-harm too. And 36% said they had fewer suicidal thoughts. And I think that's another key impact that our services are having, is actually helping people not only to live well, but to stay safe. And I think that's something that peer support can do to share, to help you to be able to live well. And I live with bipolar, so I do know those challenges that are faced day to day and long term. So please reach out for support if you ever feel yourself in that situation, but also just generally to help you manage the condition on an ongoing and regular basis. And also 23% of people shared that they were able to receive a diagnosis sooner than they would have done previously. So again, a fantastic way our services are helping people just to get access to treatment and services. And also 62% said it really helped them with contact with a health professional. So again, going to those meetings, prepping for those meetings to go and talk to a health professional, our services were helping. So another great outcome for our service users. Just to let you know, alongside our support groups, we run a fantastic e-community. We moderate it between 8 AM and 8 PM daily. And that is another way you get wide knowledge from experienced people and peers along the e-community have been supporting not only themselves, but also family and friends to live with a condition. So it's another service that I'd encourage people to sign up for. And one-to-one peer support is available from a fantastic team by phone or email. And again, that's direct lived experience or also family and friends. So again, it's a service that is open to everyone. And please do sign up for that. And those sort of feedback that we get is again related to the very strong competencies our team offer because of that shared lived experience. And that's not an easy job to do. And I really appreciate how they do that so well. I just wanted to share too, we've got some self-management. We're very invested in developing our self-management psychoeducation courses. So we're running some self-management courses in Oxford. Please do check out our self-management pages for the actual dates and up-and-coming dates for those. We're going to be running some surveys after the conference as well, where we're expanding and looking to develop our services in other areas. So look out for that coming up. We've got a mood tracker app, and I'm really excited to say today it's going to be launched in France. So that's a really exciting piece of news that we're sharing too. The mood tracker app is a tool to help mood management really, and helps everybody to stay well by checking their mood, and also enables you, I use it, enables you to sort of get that overarching picture of what's happening with your mood and why it might have dipped. You can look at some early intervention then if you need to. So that's again another great tool to use alongside your other self-management tools. Do user, could it be bipolar? We've got an MDQ questionnaire, mood disorder questionnaire, which can also help you identify symptoms and early signs if perhaps you're not sure you have bipolar, but you're displaying some of the symptoms or think you might be. We've got a fantastic also e-learning course that has lots and lots of information. I'd encourage anybody to take that because it will refresh knowledge, but it will also educate if you're not sure what bipolar is all about, and it'll give you a good insight into the condition, including sections for family and friends, which I think is key as well. We've also got chatbot, which you can book those diary appointments with our callback service. You can also find, it also has about 1,000 questions in its bank, in its memory bank, so you can ask lots of different questions around bipolar. Our Facebook Lives, which Simon, Ambassador April, and my colleague Molly share over the weeks, and they talk about very fantastic topics around bipolar, but also very insightful information they pass on, which is worth checking into. If you like podcasts, Emma Bell is a fantastic host on those, and actually enables, again, another topic, way to address the topic and access the topics. There's different ways to access information, I think, are important. We've got loads of webinars. We did some last week in the lead up to this conference, and we'll be running more following the conference. So do check out our digital tab on our website, because you will find lots of resources and information. And also we're always looking for new volunteers if you're interested or you know anyone who might be, to join our services and the organisation. And I want to give a shout out this evening to PayPlan, who's one of our great partners. They've helped us help people to manage debt, and we know that one of the symptoms of bipolar can be sort of getting into a financial crisis through overspending, and our PayPlan partnership has enabled us to really support the community through getting very, very key advice at a vital time. So one of the other sort of news is I wanted to share, just our website in our evaluation was rated very highly, so especially for family and friends. So if you're a family and friends, you're concerned about a loved one, or you just want more information, just check out what resources we've got on our website, because there is a lot, and there's a lot that you can get help with as well as a loved one or a carer to support yourself. So that's the other side. And just one last thing to say, creating positive change for peer support, and that was our in-person groups were rated highly in doing that, followed by our online groups and Mood Tracker app and e-community. So together, using different services or sometimes combined services can really help people stay well, live well, and benefit from managing what is a very complex and difficult condition. But you can live well with it. So that's my message I'd like to leave you with tonight. And I'll hand back to you, Simon.
Thanks, Rosie. I think that is a really, really important message, isn't it? Which is, it is possible to live a good life with bipolar. It's never easy, and for some people it can be very, very difficult, but you can certainly lead a better life by getting the support and the help that you need. And peer support is a really important part of that, because everyone's got a little piece of the jigsaw, and the different insights they've gained, the different experiences, different approaches. Some work for some people and some work for others. So it's really important if we can bring people together to be able to talk about the condition, have an open conversation, then we can help more and more people to be able to lead better lives. One of the things that I was really proud of over the last year, which Rosie touched upon, was we launched our Mood Tracker app in French, which is amazing. So we did a lot of work with Renault in France, and really pleased that we took our app, which we've talked about in previous years. It's been downloaded over 30,000 times now. It's produced by someone living with bipolar, Andrew, who you're probably familiar with. He's been on a couple of these conferences, and he did a fantastic job working with us to translate it into French. So bipolar is slowly going global, in the sense that we're working with all these amazing charities across the world to be able to give them resources to be able to live well. I'm now going to hand back over to Leah. Leah, are you there? I'm going to hand over to you, Leah, and we're going to do...
Thank you to Simon and Rosie there for that very important update on all the fantastic work that Bipolar UK have been up to and what is coming up over the next year. Okay, so a really important topic of discussion is what happens when you've been diagnosed with bipolar and then it's time to go back to work. I mean, this is something that most people who have a bipolar diagnosis struggle with. It's very layered, it's very nuanced, it's very worrying for many people. It certainly was a massive, massive concern for me. In fact, I never envisioned going back to work. I just didn't even think it was possible. I thought, right, that's it. I've been given this label of bipolar, and every stigma that I could feel, I felt it. And I just thought, well, that's it now. My life is over. I'm never going to go back to work. I'm never going to live life the way I knew it before bipolar came along. And I just won't be able to navigate this. And if I can, will people respect me? Will people want to work with me? Will people support me? Will people care? So those are just some of the things that were going through my mind. And I know that it caused me a lot of concern, a lot of anxiety, a lot of, exacerbating of my symptoms. And so I definitely feel like this is a discussion that is very important, that many people think about, and it needs to take place. So what better time than on World Bipolar Day with Bipolar UK in our live conference? I'm going to hand back over to Rosie and to Simon and to a whole team of people. Actually, before I do that, I want to set up a poll right now because I want you to get involved. And we are live and interactive. So if you do want to tweet us, you could do that at Bipolar UK. You could also message us as well. You can email too. But we want to be interactive with you today. So I want to ask you, does your workplace support the needs of people affected by bipolar? So that's a really important question because some do and many don't, right? So do your workplace support the needs of people affected by bipolar? So whether you have bipolar yourself or whether you're an ally or someone who's affected by it, do you know this policy in your workplace? Is there anything in place that helps people who have a severe mental health condition, such as bipolar? Please give us your answer. So you could choose yes, no, sometimes, or I don't know. So there's multiple choice. You've got 4 choices. You could say yes, you could say no, you could say sometimes, or you could say I don't know, because maybe you don't. But that'll be interesting. And then Simon will be giving the results to that. So let's get into this session then. Simon's going to share some of the results from the recent workplace survey that Bipolar UK sent out. Many of you responded, so thank you so much for that, because all of this really helps with the research and the work that goes in behind the scenes that the charity are trying to lobby on our behalf. And I say our, meaning those of us affected with bipolar or who have lived experience of it. Then the panel are going to discuss some of the challenges people living with the condition can face at work, and also some of the solutions, the strategies businesses can implement to create an inclusive work environment. And I think that is the name of the game, really. That's the most important. Now, let me introduce this panel. Eve Mayer, after a stint in advertising, Eve began working at Bipolar UK as a senior public policy officer in 2022. Welcome, Eve. And she was diagnosed with bipolar in 2017 when she was a student at university. So Eve is on the panel. Then we've got Leando Malawo, and Leando was born in Zambia. She's now living in Kent, and she works part-time in banking, which I know is a very stressful career. So it's fantastic that she's able to do that. And I'm sure she's going to give some insight into her knowledge of how she navigates such a, what is potentially a stressful career such as banking. Now 33, she was detained under the Mental Health Act, and she was diagnosed with bipolar at the age of 25. So I guess over those years, Leando is a prime example of someone who was hospitalized and who has come out and who has obviously turned it all around and is now working and thriving. So that's incredible. And also Joanna Dunbar-Webb. Joanna's career began as a commercial solicitor. She's now a senior business operations specialist in the people and culture space with international experience gained living and working in the UK, Australia, Egypt and France. My goodness, Joanna, you're all over the place. It's brilliant. Joanna is also a counsellor. She's an instructor of yoga and meditation. I like the sound of that. She has a private holistic therapy practice, and she devotes her free time to helping others and supporting causes like this. And as a neurodivergent woman living with bipolar, Joanna is an active champion and ambassador on accessibility, inclusion, and diversity in all walks of life. So I'm loving the sound of this panel. I'm going to hand it over to you guys, and don't forget to you as well. We want your answer for that poll. Just to remind you of the poll question: does your workplace support the needs of people affected by bipolar? Multiple choice. You could say yes, no, sometimes, or I don't know. And at the end of this discussion right here, Simon will give the results. So over to you, Simon, and the crew. I'm looking forward to this one.
Thanks, Leah. That's very, very kind. And work is such an important area for people living with bipolar because, firstly, we all need money to be able to survive, but also we need to have purpose in life, and work can be a key route to doing that. And a lot of the things as well that can help people manage bipolar in the workplace would also help with volunteering as well, which is another really key area where people with bipolar really want to make a contribution in wider society. So as a charity, about a third of our staff are living with bipolar. So it's really something, we don't pretend to be perfect on this at all, but we certainly have to work hard, really work hard every day to be able to be as bipolar friendly employer as possible. So it's really great to have some insights from our side, both in terms of as an employer, from Rosie's perspective as a manager, who's going to be coming on in a minute, but also from Eve as well, talking about how she's been managing bipolar in the workplace. So it's fantastic to have the child's perspective. So we did a big survey just before Christmas. We really want to find out what it was like to work with bipolar, and we're going to be publishing a report on this later on in the year. But I thought, given that we're here today, it'd be nice to share some of the findings. A big thank you to all of you who have been who did complete that survey. So it's going to be really important for us advocating for support for people with bipolar in the workplace. Now, one of the things that really stood out from that was there's still a lot of stigma in the workplace. A number of people are still feeling that they're held back by stigma and discrimination. And about a quarter of people, rather shockingly, who actually told their employer that they had bipolar regretted making that decision. And that's a really sad state of affairs when people feel they're being honest about it, but they've gone to their employer to try to find out about getting some extra support, and then they've not had the response that they needed and deserved. And it's worth remembering that bipolar itself is a protected characteristic under the Equalities Act. So you should not be discriminated against for having bipolar. So it's really shocking that that's still happening. One of the other things that came up from it, which really surprised me, was the fact that a lot of people with bipolar are still feeling held back because of a lack of confidence. Now, that again could be linked to the stigma that people are experiencing, but it could be also just to do with the condition itself, that actually not having the right support services to manage the condition means that they don't have the confidence, perhaps to build their careers, perhaps they've had to take time out from it and they're still a bit unsure of themselves. But it did make me think as well about what role we could play as a charity to be able to help people build their careers and to build their confidence. And there must be some role there to play, I think, with peer support, to be able to enable people with bipolar to be able to support each other. Someone who's perhaps progressed a bit further in their career while living with their condition, to be able to help someone else who's at an earlier stage. So we'll be going to be looking at that as a charity over the next year. And we were pleasantly surprised. Actually, a lot of people with bipolar are actually working. I mean, there's a lot of the stereotype of bipolar, the representations of bipolar in the media of people not being able to work. But actually, most people with bipolar, from my experience, are working, and some of them are actually in very demanding jobs. So we found about 8% were higher rate taxpayers. So we're really pleased to see that many people are actually being able to manage their bipolar well in the workplace. One of the areas where we thought that there could be more support is there are schemes to help people with long-term conditions like bipolar to manage a condition better in the workplace, and to be able to provide some funding to employers to do that. So the key one for that is called Access to Work. Now, this was originally set up for people with physical conditions, but not many people with bipolar know that it also applies for people who are living with mental health conditions as well. So this could fund up to £60,000 worth of support each year. But we found there's about 35% of the people responding to our survey, so probably about 200 or 300 people told us that they were really interested in it, but they never actually heard of it. So there's clearly something there around awareness raising from that area of DWP as well. But we would love to be able to work with anyone with bipolar who's working, who would like to apply to that fund, and through that you'll be able to get some workplace training provided, and the development of advanced statements as well, which Eve's going to come on to talk about later on. So if you are interested in getting some more workplace support and putting in practice some of the things you've heard here today, go to workplace@bipolaruk.org. Now, I'm very delighted to be introducing Rose back, bringing you back, Rosie. Hopefully you're still there. There we go, Rosie. Now, Rosie, you, like myself, manage a number of staff living with bipolar. So you're going to talk about what it's like as a manager, because it's bipolar. I mean, we know from working with a number of staff with bipolar, you wouldn't know who's living with bipolar and who's not within the charity, would you, at all, in terms of it? So you really can't judge. If you know some of the staff members got bipolar, some staff members have had to take quite a lot of sick leave, some staff members have taken very little. So it's not one size fits all. People have very different experiences, but there are certain things that we do as a charity to try to bring out the best in people who are living with the condition. So what we've been doing, Rosie?
So one of the key things, I think, is to have good practices in place, good policies, and also provide staff and managers with training. We use a really good HR consultant, so we actually can check in and see what the situation is if we're worried about somebody in terms of managing their well-being over a longer period. There are tools that you can get to support you, such as occupational health. So if you're a manager and you're not too sure about what to do next, you can ask for an occupational health assessment, for example, and that can help inform both of you, both the employee and you, to help the manager, in a sense, guide and steer the support needs of that individual. So I think it's an individual approach per employee. So know what, like you mentioned, no one size fits all. So it's to make sure the person feels supported, that you have an inclusive work environment. People feel that confidentiality is always kind of the word, but it's kind of maintained. That's the word I'm looking for. So that they feel secure to disclose. Because I think if you feel unsafe, or you feel like if you do disclose, you're going to be A, discriminated, or B, gossiped about. And I had that experience personally. I had a previous employer told my manager, and then there was some gossip. And I was never ever asked about, since I disclosed, okay, what support should we put in place, or what would be helpful? Nobody ever thought to ask me that. They just ignored it after that, and it was like I never told them. So, but their sort of colleagues exactly knew, because I overheard the gossip. So it's kind of like, please have good practice in your workplace. So taking good supervision, so one-to-one supervision, encourage staff to have annual leave. And if they're noticing a dip in mood, or whether it's elevating, maybe their mood's elevating, encourage them to, again, take some downtime, take some time off. What helps them to reduce that elevation? What are their natural techniques? And I think Eve's going to talk about advanced statements later, which I have one that we've discussed. So I think checking your mood, using the mood diary to help manage, or the mood tracker app to help manage your mood. And if you're having a really off day, maybe it's a better conversation to have with your manager. Say, look, I'm not in great space today. I'll take today off, but I'll be in tomorrow. It's better to have that early intervention rather than a longer period of sickness. So if you can do that, and you have the flexibility within your workplace, and the other thing I talk about is reasonable adjustments. So have that conversation with your manager, that you're open to telling them that you have bipolar, so that you can put reasonable adjustments. So one of the things we do, so for example, medication sometimes can make people drowsy in the morning. Consequently, you might want to start a bit later, so maybe 9:30, 10, rather than the 9 a.m. Start time, and work a bit later. So that sort of drowsiness has worn off by the time you start work. Those type of really simple but effective and impactful flexible adjustments can be done quite easily, I think. If you have a system or an office or a production, you might not have such flexibility. You might be in a sort of have to have a rota or something, but maybe within that you can offer some flexibility. So again, under the Equalities Act, it's like, what reasonable adjustments can you put in place so that the employees aren't disadvantaged? Because it's about making sure everybody has the right to deliver their work effectively. And that's what reasonable adjustments are about, making sure people can do that. And also make sure everybody knows the same thing. So policies, procedures, rules, arrangements, communication is really key, I think, in this message. Making sure people are all on the same page, and that goes through from recruitment stage, onboarding people to offboarding, and making sure that if, you know, and Helen, one of our colleagues, does a fantastic job. We have a staff forum. So I think that's another space where people can go, they can talk to each other about well-being, self-care tips. I think those sort of spaces are really helpful. We have occupational health through our HR team, but we also have an EAP program, which is a employee assistance program. So people can get up to 6 weeks of counselling and talking therapy if they're worried about stress, anything to do related with work or non-related with work. So there's tools as well that can help people. I think it's really key that as an employee you understand and ask your employees what their needs are. So it's not, if it's not bipolar, it might be a comorbid condition. They might live with other conditions alongside bipolar. Ask them what's effective for them, what's helpful, what's not helpful. Because by asking what's not helpful, you're going to find out much better ways to actually help and address what the gaps are. So I think it's key to consider those.
Thanks, Rosie. It's going to be different for every person, isn't it? That's something that I've learned, but there are some common themes. Leander, it'd be really lovely to have you on now. What have you found helpful and unhelpful in the workplace, managing your bipolar?
I would say being helpful first is having open communication with my managers. Them also, as Rosie said, asking how can we support you. Initially, I didn't know how to answer that question. I wasn't aware of the ways that my employer can make adjustments for me, and I was scared to ask for them because I felt like, what right do I have to have, to have these extra rights at work? I don't know, at work compared to my peers. So being aware of the adjustments, maybe just having a Google if you can't think of things. I didn't really know one of them, such as having extra breaks was something. Especially when I started off in the banking hall, it was completely busy, and literally you could go to lunch at 2, 3, late in the day and things. So I did ask for the extra breaks. However, I didn't even take them because I was like worried about the queues out the door and things like that. So I would say put yourself first, because doing that led me to burnout. So listen to the cues of that you get in your body and your mind when you're exhausted and things like that. So definitely take every opportunity to look at other options. What's been helpful is I looked at jobs that had different shift patterns as well. So in my first job, I worked from, it allowed me to start my shifts at 2 p.m. So being on medication, this is before I knew I could ask for adjustments at work. So before, when I just approached work, I looked for things that would suit my needs at the time. I hope that answers. That's great.
And anything that was particularly unhelpful?
I think people not understanding the condition and assuming that I was just asking for things just to ask. Mm-hmm. And I think it's difficult because I had a new manager come in. She doesn't know me. But at the same time, I feel like maybe the other manager should have let them know the background. And there was an incident where I needed time after therapy because I was an outpatient, at one point. So it meant I spent a whole day having therapy, and then the next day I'd be completely exhausted. So I was asking to go part-time because they couldn't allow me to have holidays that much. And she was just like, how can you, we could never do something like that. Like, she got really annoyed with it. And it caused a lot of friction initially until she found out the therapy was actually provided by the company. So it wasn't like something I had just decided to do myself. And she apologized profusely, but it was like, have that communication. I don't know if it's difficult, because then do you now get labeled the person with bipolar, that people need to kind of put you in cotton wool about things? But I think let everybody know the background of the employee that you're working with, because I shouldn't have to explain over and over.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, everyone needs some reasonable adjustments, don't they? And flexible working is certainly the way forward for lots of employers. But I think it's really good if they paid for the therapy. I think that's a really good example of where they then had ownership of that in terms of supporting you. So that's a really good example. But handovers between managers can be really difficult, can't they? You can have a really good manager and then suddenly a really bad manager, and that has a massive impact. I'm going to bring in Joe now. Joe, you're dialing in from Peru, is that right? Are you there, Joe?
Hi. Yes.
Hi, Joe. No one would even know you in Peru. I haven't said anything, but I thought just for the sheer glamour of it, you're over in Lima, aren't you? So that's fantastic.
I am, yes.
So, Joe, just want to talk about your experience of championing inclusivity in a bipolar-friendly workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be invited to speak. So, so my role is obviously, as Leah said, I started my career as a lawyer in commercial litigation and employment. I realized that was going to be a foundation to my career, and I meandered around a few different business areas until I settled specializing in the people and culture space. I was a late comer to having diagnoses, but managed to do that around that time, and now I'm working in the PR communications marketing insights sector, and also I'm a business psychology research academic, and I have lived experience of neurodiversity, mental health and well-being, and seen and unseen disabilities. So these topics come into my everyday work, and my work revolves around these topics in the workplace. In the workplace, we've developed a really active DEI committee, and I run the pillar that looks at accessibility and inclusion for neurodiversity and disabilities seen and unseen, and that includes mental health. So we've designed some accessibility and resources guidance. I'm currently developing an event around seen and unseen disabilities for Global Accessibility Awareness event in May. And we celebrate annual events. For example, I worked with my marketing colleague and Sarah Owen, who's the PR communications representative of Bipolar UK. We did a podcast together recently, which was really great. Lovely to have that conversation. So we've embraced a diverse workforce, and now our commitment is really critical to focus on inclusion by talking about these topics, by offering support and just learning together and inspiring each other around these topics. So I've developed with my colleagues flexible working patterns. I actually developed the diversity and inclusion policy. We've got a lot of disability and supportive policies in the business and procedures, including awareness training and coaching. And sometimes I find it's better to tackle the challenges rather than going to the full diagnosis. It feels a bit more manageable and helpful to meet someone where they're struggling, so that we can manage the situation and help find them ways to thrive. And bearing in mind the symptomology can overlap, for example, between bipolar, ADHD and the menopause. So I practice by looking at things a bit more holistically.
Well, I think it's a really critical area. Thanks for that, Joe. And I think it's so critical that HR departments take ownership of bipolar, isn't it? And putting it part of the diversity, equality and inclusion agenda, I think is really, really important to make sure it sits alongside all the other things that we're doing to make the workplace as inclusive as possible. So that's really positive that you've been having those conversations with your employer and been able to lead on it, because ultimately we want people with lived experience leading on this, don't we? Which is the most important thing.
And that it's possible to have a really great career and personal life and everything else as well, especially with the right support and treatment, whether it's a full diagnosis or whatever everyone needs at that particular time in their life cycle.
Absolutely. I mean, this is had a heartbreaking session this morning with Andy, who was on the sofa, the BBC sofa with me, talking about his daughter, Megan. And when she got a diagnosis, she thought that was the end she thought there was no chance of her being able to develop a career, and sadly that's what contributed to her taking her life. But if she'd, well, I'd like to hope that if she'd seen some of the conversations that people are having today and been able to understand that you can have a career. There's some very, very successful people with bipolar. A lot of people don't want to have big, successful careers. They want to work in shops, they want to do all sorts of different things. They want to have families, they want to be able to travel the world. All the things that we take for granted, people with bipolar should be able to do all of those things. They might not be quite the way that we would do them like everyone else, but they're certainly very doable. Eve, now how are we going to bring it all together, Eve? Because there we go. Because we need to write these things down, don't we? Because it's all well and good talking about it, but we need to write them down and put them into practice. So you've been looking at advanced statements, haven't you?
Absolutely, and it's really interesting hearing everyone's perspectives, and obviously there's a lot that can be done from a workplace perspective by employers, but there's also things that employees or people with bipolar just in general can do in workplaces, I think, to make sure that they are able to thrive in the workplace. I know that some workplaces are more well equipped than others to be able to deal with the nuances of something like bipolar, but there's some things that people can do. So advanced statements are one of those things, which are basically a kind of collaborative tool that both an employer and an employee will write together, which will enable an employer to understand what the individual symptoms and preferred support options for the person with bipolar are, so that if they do get ill or if they start to change in mood or energy, then their employer knows immediately how to deal with that and what to do in those circumstances. And the employee then also has a preference in terms of how they're treated within those circumstances. So it enables employers to understand kind of warning signs of when things may shift for people. I think obviously there's very clear benefits for that on both sides. It means that dialogue is there for people, and there's also a kind of peace of mind for people in workplaces in knowing that they are going to be given, hopefully, the care that they deserve or that they know is appropriate should they become ill. It kind of becomes a bit of a protective net. So I know that the work and learning kind of like service assist people in helping create those advanced statements and help provide some kind of practical advice and guidance in terms of doing that. In terms of what that would consist of, usually it would have a kind of section for personal information and emergency contacts, and then things that are like a list of triggers that are work specific. So I know for me, like late hours and late working is a big trigger and has been in other jobs I've been in. I found it really difficult to be able to work and thrive in a workplace with my hours being off. So it might also be things like triggers like back-to-back meetings, things that are specific to you in your diagnosis. And then you might have a section on medication. You might have a section then on which like a breakdown kind of by the mood scale, which we have, which is one of our resources, which goes from 10 to 1, from mania to like the lowest form of mood. And you might offer a breakdown number by number of how you yourself will deal with when your mood shifts and how you would like your employer to respond accordingly. So an example of it might be if I'm 10 on the mood scale, so if I'm completely manic, I might not come to work. I might convince others that I'm okay, but might not make sense. I might show signs of self-neglect, things like that, or I might seem anxious or threatened. And then you can say, this is the help that I would want. If I'm erratic, suggest I go home. If I am evasive and refuse help, please contact X person in my phone book, or make sure you're with me when you call emergency services should you need to. And you can apply this all the way down that mood scale and in terms of what works for you. And it just allows for a massive amount of flexibility. People were also great in terms of sending in their own workplace tips. Like our community have sent in loads of really great tips about how to communicate with your employer. Things like making sure that you are already preparing what you want to say before disclosing your diagnosis, to make sure that you're prepped for that conversation and that you can say and communicate everything that you need to. You can be honest and speak up if it feels safe, or if you're struggling with workload, you can vocalize that, and things like speaking to occupational health. So people added loads of really interesting kind of sub points there. And like you said before, Simon, access to work is also a government scheme, with the aim being that it is meant to provide financial help to people in workplaces who are working, to enable them to be able to adjust their workplace environment so that they can perform properly in workplaces that might not otherwise be equipped to. So you can ask for money for things like SAD lamps if you struggle to get up in the morning, you struggle with, say, you're taking antipsychotics like I have done in the past, and I really struggle to wake up in the morning. And yeah, so it's a matter of figuring out what works for you, finding someone you can trust. And I think there's a long way to go for some workplaces, and some are great, and it's about determining that for yourself. And yeah, figuring out how you can use those things like the advanced statements, like access to work, to make sure that you are getting the most out of your own life, because you spend a huge amount of your life in work if you're working full time. So yeah.
That's great, thank you. It's impossible to disentangle bipolar from work, but it does kind of clarify what's bipolar and what's not bipolar, because it's not that like someone with bipolar is instantly going to be the best at every single job. You get like people with bipolar, like everyone else, you've got people who are performing in the jobs and people who aren't. But what it does is the advanced statement is it takes that the bipolar off, and it's a separate thing. It's not to do with performance, it's to do with managing your condition in the workplace, which is really, really important, and it helps kind of disentangle that. So it's really helpful for the staff member, and then also for the employer as well. So again, if anyone's watching this now who's interested in having an advanced statement, then do get in touch. Go to our workplace on our website. So just some quick questions. People have using the term disclosure. There's nothing wrong with using the term disclosure. I'll always defer to people living with bipolar, but disclosure kind of implies that people have got a criminal record, and there's nothing wrong with having bipolar. What language would people prefer using? Do we use like the term telling an employer? That's what I've done, or disclosure? What are people's reflections on that? And also just what are the pros and cons of telling your employer that you have bipolar? Leander, it looks like you were about to go there, so I'm going to pick on you first.
Oh gosh, I'm thinking of the word alternatively to disclosure. That's a very good point, and I've always felt that, like, even in the newspapers, you hear when they would talk about celebrities, they would say like it was a deep dark secret that they've revealed that they're depressed or something, and I didn't understand that. So I'll come back to you on that afterwards, but I'd say the pros and cons of telling your employer. First of all, pro is you're coming fully as yourself. Why would you want to work somewhere where you can't be yourself fully? You're not going to perform at your best when you can't be yourself, one. Two, it's for your benefit and protection. As you said earlier, bipolar is a protected characteristic under the Disability Act. So you're protecting yourself from discrimination. And maybe, I don't know, I haven't experienced having an episode at work or anything, but I think if your employer was aware of that before you maybe did something erratic at work, it might protect you. You might still be able to keep your job. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think it protects and works to your benefit. I would say the disadvantages, I feel, are kind of mostly in my head, because I just worry about people's perception, because you just don't know what they understand of bipolar, where they're going to come from, and what they're going to, I don't know. I feel like I've had experiences now where I don't really talk openly about it, because I feel like the person might be patronizing after a while. Or also, if something happens, it's like, oh, it's because you've got like if I had a disagreement with a colleague or something, I feel like my points were not validated so much. It's like I was upset for no reason, because I've got other things going on, when it was actually I've been wronged in this situation. That's my big worry. And
Yes.
that's
It's kind of being judged for it, isn't it? And second guessing yourself, isn't it? But I guess if we normalize bipolar in the workplace, because there are loads of people with bipolar working, most people have a colleague with bipolar and they probably don't even realize it. Then those kind of things should kind of be mitigated, hopefully, but it will take time. So just to wrap up, I think I was going to ask you all a question about, can you have a successful career living with bipolar? And I think the answer is emphatically yes. I've met loads of people with very successful careers, many of which are on the call now. So bipolar shouldn't hold you back. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. It is really tough living with bipolar, but it is possible to manage the condition, and it will get easier with time if you have a really good supportive employer. But choose the right employer. I think that's the key thing as well, and that who are prepared to take you as your whole person, isn't it, Leander? That was a really important message that you put across there. And also that we're there to support you as well. If you want to come to the charity, our peer support service is always there. Our e-community is available for you if you have any employment questions. And likewise, if you want to get an advance statement, we can help you with that as well. And just finally, please tell us what your thoughts, what your experiences are with the poll. Do the poll, and we'll be doing the findings later as well, so we'll be able to share this later. It was lovely seeing you all. Thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck in all of your different careers. And I'd love to see you again on future sessions as well. So keep safe and keep winning.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Right, so the next session, we're going to be looking, we've got the poll updates now, haven't we? We're going to a break. We're going to a break, so we've got a 5-minute comfort break. I think there should be some nice lift music for you to enjoy. Come back in 5 minutes' time. I'll see you all soon.
Hello friends, welcome back. It is World Bipolar Day. It's also Easter weekend. I hope you're not gorging too much on chocolate, but you know, if you want to have a little bit, it won't hurt. Surely, it won't hurt. Make yourself happy. Okay, so I hope that you've enjoyed the discussion so far. The discussion on bipolar in the workplace was incredibly insightful. So thank you to the ladies and gentlemen for that topic as well. Okay, so coming up right now, we're going to have a really important discussion. Let's talk bipolar. For me, I was diagnosed coming up to 12 years ago now. I don't even know where the time has gone. And it's been such a journey to wellness. It's taken a while. And there was a time where I was in a loop. I just never thought I was going to get out. And actually just the journey to diagnosis in itself was incredibly difficult because I was constantly misdiagnosed. In fact, I was misdiagnosed for years and years and years. And when I was showing up to my GP, my symptoms weren't recognized. And that could be partly because most of the time I was going when I was more depressed. So the thought was, well, you're depressed, here's some antidepressants. However, there were times when I was presenting to my GP in a manic state. And actually I was saying to my GP, I've seen it on the TV. I've got bipolar. I've seen it in the movies. Some of my my behaviors are just not right for me. I'm really out of character. I feel like I've lost control. I don't feel like this is depression. Yes, I felt depressed in the past, but what I'm feeling right now, it doesn't feel like depression to me. And it was largely ignored, and the signs completely just, yeah, they just went over several GPs' heads, to be honest with you. I eventually got diagnosed, and that's well documented online and in media and on Bipolar UK's own website if you want to know my story. But the importance of quick diagnosis can really change everything, because I became really, really unwell, and ultimately my life was in danger because of it. It was really difficult, and many people, in fact most people, I could say all people, didn't notice, because I always sound very animated. I always sound like I'm with it. I sometimes look, or quite often look, like I'm very well put together. Even when I was highly unwell. And yet some of the stigmas and the untruths of, because I'm articulate or because I was aware, I had self-awareness, I knew what was going on around me. According to some of the doctors I saw, well, you can't have bipolar because you're very articulate. And people with bipolar, they're not particularly articulate like you are, which is obviously not true. Okay, so speaking about bipolar, speaking about the symptoms, what to look out for, the stigmas, why it's so important to get early intervention, early diagnosis, early support, just changes everything. And I often wonder, if I got support much earlier in my journey, how that would have changed my life for the better, and how much pain and anguish that I could have probably cut out, to be honest with you, that I could have done with not having. With that said, I'm here to tell the tale, right? With all the knowledge that I've got, with all the teachings and the learnings, with the education that I've had to give to myself. And now I guess because of that, I'm able to do something like this. So I guess looking at the positives and everything, that is the positive that I have taken out of this situation. But that's still not the case for millions of people around the world, you know, and none of us should be put in that position, you know, with our backs against the wall, desperate for help, crying out for help, like I certainly was for many, many years. So to talk about this more, actually, we have a really great discussion here with Sara Schley and David Harper. So basically, the speaker and author, Sara Schley, she's chatting to BBC broadcaster David Harper about the importance of getting the right diagnosis quickly, which is what I was just saying, right? And shining a light on bipolar type 2. Also, how we can all change or all challenge stigma and save lives. I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Both David and Sara have lived experience of bipolar. So this is going to be a great discussion. And just to tell you a bit more about each of them, Sara is the author of the acclaimed memoir, Brainstorm, From Broken to Blessed on the Bipolar Spectrum. Wow. That's an incredible title. She is a business consultant, a speaker, an author who has led organizational transformations at renowned companies around the world. Congratulations, Sara, because I know that must have been a real challenge, somebody with living with bipolar. So it just shows how we can still thrive in the workplace, and we can still thrive after a diagnosis. Sara is a mother, she's a grandmother, she's a community leader, and she's also been married to a great guy for 26 years. I love this. She's mostly kept what she calls her bipolar type 2 brain, that's on the bipolar spectrum, a secret for 4 decades. I can relate to that because some of you may know, I kept my diagnosis a secret for the best part of 10 years until I said enough's enough. I needed to get well, and I felt like that was the last piece of the puzzle that was preventing me from getting well. So just the fact of reading Sara's story here saying for 4 decades she hid that. And now she's living with it and speaking about bipolar unapologetically is just inspirational to me. The fact that she's led organizations, the fact that she's made change, the fact that she's written books, the fact that she's a mother, a grandmother, a leader. That to me, representation, she's like my poster girl at this point. And she's now choosing to share her story to help end stigma and ultimately save lives. I love that. And David Harper, he's incredible. He's a presenter and a journalist. He works for the BBC. So somebody in the media industry like myself, we know that it could be a very pressurizing environment. The fact that he's doing it and he has been doing it for a long time, good on you, David. Not only does he work for the BBC, he works for ITV and LBC as well, just for some of his credits. And he was diagnosed with bipolar over 10 years ago and decided to go public about his diagnosis just last year. Again, something I can relate to. I think, David, you also did it online, didn't you? Came out with an online post about your bipolar diagnosis. I did the same. I mean, it's not something of choice. I think it's just one day you just get fed up of hiding it, of burying all the stigma and shame and just go, well, enough's enough. Like, it's time to move on. So we brought the two of them together to talk about all of this, and I can't wait to hear this discussion. So over to you, Sara and David.
Very much. Sara, thank you so much for speaking to us. We're talking specifically here about the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2, and this is quite poorly understood, including by a lot of people who actually have bipolar disorder. What is the distinction and why is it important?
Okay, well, thank you so much, David, for having me. It's a pleasure to join you today. The distinction between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 is really critical. And the main difference is that people with bipolar 2 and people down the bipolar spectrum from bipolar 1 do not have mania. And this was very explicitly shared with us last week by Dr. Roger McIntyre out of Toronto. And he's, world authority. He says that 2 out of 3 people that he meets, and actually 2 out of 3 people by the statistics that have bipolar actually do not experience mania. 2 out of 3, the majority. And why is that important? Is because we're consistently misdiagnosed and then given the wrong medications, which make us worse.
I think we work to a definition here in the UK about people who do have hypomania, but maybe not in quite the same way as people with bipolar 1. Your story is quite interesting, and actually it's one of the reasons I'm really interested in speaking to you, because our stories along this road are quite similar. I in common with a lot of people, it took you quite a long time to get diagnosed.
That's right. It took me 25 years from my first bipolar episode at age 21 until I actually finally got the diagnosis that saved my life, which is that I have bipolar 2, which is a form of bipolarity that responds beautifully to bipolar medications and other bipolar treatments. Prior to that, I was misdiagnosed with major depression. Many of us with bipolar 2, with the types of bipolar that don't experience mania, are consistently misdiagnosed with major depression. Why? Because when we go to the doctor, we don't go when we're feeling great. We go when we're, suicidal or having severe symptoms that look exactly like regular depression.
I'm only recently learning the distinction. When I was diagnosed, and this was over 10 years ago, I was told quite clearly by psychiatrists that I had bipolar disorder, but there was never any discussion beyond that. I was just told that as a diagnosis. And it's only more recently, I've not had an official bipolar 2 diagnosis, but looking at my symptoms and the way it is, it would appear that is the category I fall into. And it's interesting how poorly understood it can be.
It really is. I mean, and this is not only poorly understood by many psychiatric professionals, but by any primary care clinician. And I don't know if it's similar in the UK, I imagine it is, but that 90% of prescriptions for antidepressant in the US are actually written by primary care docs who have little to no training in psychiatry at all. And most people who go to their doctor, most depression or psychiatric concerns will begin in the primary care office. So you show up to your doctor saying, I feel lousy, I can't get out of bed, I don't want to live anymore, I have no joy. And they, check the box and think she's depressed and give you antidepressants, which in my case, in many cases, for people who have bipolar can make us worse.
It's a little different in the UK with the National Health Service that we have, but I know quite a few times, and it always seemed a bit bizarre to me, even after I was seeing a psychiatrist, I was still occasionally getting called back to my general practitioner who was quizzing me about this. And I'm thinking, well, I'm speaking to somebody who specialises in this. I don't understand why I'm being asked this here as well.
And they still don't know. In my story, which I write about in my memoir, it took me 5 psychiatrists. The first 4 got it wrong. And you'd think that, well, they've been trained, but a lot of psychiatrists, depending on when they got their training, were not exposed to the degrees of heterogeneity, let's say, in bipolar. So they don't know. Again, you show up with depression, I think you're depressed.
Let's talk a little bit about your journey, if we can. We talked briefly about your diagnosis and also the road towards being open about it. It's quite similar to the journey I went through as well. At what point, I mean, even before seeking any professional help, at what point did you think there's something a bit different about the way I am here?
Oh boy. Well, for me, it was very dramatic because I was 21, and at that point I was, kind of this kid riding high. I was, had great grades at one top university. I was going to med school. I had great friends. I played varsity sports. It was like full speed ahead. And then all of a sudden, like almost classic on my 21st birthday, it was if a switch had flipped, and suddenly I was like in this tailspin down to living hell, and my cognitive function was gone, and I couldn't, I was very social usually, and I locked myself in my room, and I didn't want to see my friends. I couldn't find my way to class, even though I'd been there for 4 years. My coordination was gone, my joie de vivre was gone, and I almost couldn't add 2 + 2, and I'd been, pre-med with 4.0 in science, high grades, and so the contrast was so dramatic and terrifying that I knew something was wrong. This first episode lasted for about 8 months. Now, I should mention that in my case, my mother also suffered terribly, as did my grandfather. But I did not want to accept that I had the same thing that they did, even though I had.
And you were aware of what they had, even at that point. You knew that existed in your family.
Oh yeah, very much so. Now, we didn't have a name for it. We didn't know it was bipolar. I would call them bipolar 2, like me, because I know my mom responded beautifully to lithium. And I think if you respond to lithium, then you're probably going to be bipolar. Most people with regular depression wouldn't respond positively to that. So she and my grandfather have, in retrospect, I think what I have exactly. They suffered brutally, and I watched it growing up. My mom would have 9-10 months at a time where she was incapacitated. Otherwise, brilliant, beautiful, lovely, radiant human being.
It is a bit of a jigsaw puzzle in some ways, I feel. I mean, I think there has been potentially, I mean, I know there have been some cases in my family, and I think there may have been others. And it's because it was so poorly talked about and because nobody wanted to open up about this. When you go back 50, 60, 70 years, I'm almost kind of putting together stories I hear from family members about things that had happened. You're thinking, actually, this might be more significant than you're letting on. But people didn't want to talk about it in, if you go back, to those periods.
They didn't tell anyone. I don't think my grandfather in the 50s told a soul. And he was a leader in his community, and he suffered terribly. My mother, 1960s, 70s, 80s, she wasn't telling anybody. Nobody except our immediate family knew. She wasn't even telling her best friends. So there was no support, and there was extreme trauma, and then complicated or made worse because of the shame and the stigma and the secrets.
What was the point that you first sought some professional help? What was the driving issue? I know just kind of getting over that hump to actually seeing someone in the first place is really not easy.
It wasn't long after that first episode, because I happened to have 1 or 2 friends that were that had a counselor, a therapist, and they set me up with this person. But I didn't see a psychiatrist for 20 some years because
from that first point at which you experienced
I didn't want
it.
to. I think it was like 21 years, because at that point I had little kids, and I had twins, and one of them was having severe breathing issues, and we couldn't get to the bottom what was going on for her. And I was severely depressed. I'm like, I have to do something to get better, to save this kid. So I finally let one of my friends drag me to a psychiatrist, but that was 20 years down the line, because I didn't want to take medication. I didn't want a diagnosis. I had all this internalized stigma. I tell my younger self, I wish that I had gotten help sooner.
How did it feel once you first got a diagnosis? I mean, I've heard a lot of people say it almost feels like a bit of a relief.
I have to say it was a relief because I had this intuition maybe that my mom might have been bipolar, because I knew that lithium worked for her. And now it's many, many years later, and my mom's gone to the next world. And my sister, who's a decade older than me, so she had perspective. And I said to her, I said, Martha, do you think mom must have been bipolar? And I was very sick at the time. I'm like, do you think we need to get me a bipolar doctor? And she luckily was able to find someone. And so that when I went to this person, and here's a big irony, David, after 25 years, he diagnosed me in 15 minutes with 5 questions.
That's very similar to what happened to me.
I'm telling you this. I'm just getting chills. It's so not always easy, but in my case, it was super easy to find when you knew the right questions to ask. Boom, done. And because he was so clear, and he was like, stay the course, we know what you have. You're going to get better. And I did.
You mentioned before that it took you quite a long time after being diagnosed to be public about it. And exactly the same was true of me. I first told people outside of my tight inner circle last year after about 10 years.
Wow, yeah.
Why? I mean, we're talking about a different time, a different country, a different situation. Why did you keep it quiet for that long?
I was afraid of the reaction of my mostly professional colleagues. In my life previous to being a full-time mental health advocate, I was a professional corporate consultant. I worked in major corporations for like 30 years. I did not think they were going to give me any latitude on this. And I thought I'd lose clients, and I thought, I'd lose esteem. And then I was also concerned for my kids. Would they have a stigma associated with their mom being bipolar, and everybody's judgments about that. So I held it to myself, and it finally shifted around the time of the pandemic.
It's interesting because I'm a freelance journalist, and exactly the same, if maybe even more so, because you think when you are self-employed, the risk that someone will just go, oh, I'm not going to employ him because it might get to the point where I need him to do something, and he might be in another world, and it might never work. And I was really worried when I finally did go public that I'd end up finding my diary suddenly getting quite empty. Fortunately, that hasn't happened. When did you feel confident that you could tell people about? What was the point at which that started to change?
There were some signs, if you will. What happened for me was I had worked on this memoir from 2008. It wasn't until 22 that it got published. So a few years before then, I think I put it away for about a decade. And then one day in the summer, and I had been out on an adventure with some friends. We went out for what you guys would say pub, for your beer and whatever. And she said to me she'd had a rough summer, and I said, why? And she said that my nephew tragically took his own life, and we think he was bipolar. And I found myself responding, so am I, which I never say in public. But I felt this connection with her, and I wanted to kind of, de-shame it, right? Connect and say, yeah, me too. And people usually, no, you, Sara, really? They think of me as high functioning. And yeah, me. So I told her that I'd written a little bit about it. She says, you know what I do? I said, I don't remember. She said, I publish memoirs. Send me some chapters. And long story short, she said, in honor of my nephew, I'd like to edit this for free. So I started to have signs like that, like, maybe I'm supposed to do this. And then
it's difficult to say no under those circumstances.
Right, no kidding. And then I had a doctor who, Dr. Jim Phillips, who read an early manuscript, and he was like, this has to get out there. So I was getting this kind of feedback. And then I think sort of the kicker was my teenage twins, who were 16, I think, at the time. I said to them, guys, I have this dilemma. I got this offer, for this woman to publish it to edit it for free. On the other hand, I'm worried about the stigma. Do you guys care for the stigma? The twins simultaneously said, Mom, you have to do this. Is the most important thing you could do. Don't worry about the stigma. That's your generation. We don't care. Our friends don't care.
I mean, that's really heartening to hear, isn't it? That somebody,
right? And
not to say it doesn't exist in younger generations, but there's a really different. The prevalent view is so different.
Really different. I mean, we learn about it in health ed. We have people who are cutting, and people, so they're like, do what you gotta do it. And I was so moved by that, tears coming down my face because it was dark, they couldn't see. And so I felt like they're championing from your teenage kids. It's kind of like, okay, I got to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very similar, but sort of from the other perspective, from my point of view, because I'd been in so many production team meetings for radio and TV programs where we'd been covering mental health issues, and we'd been talking about how important it was to be open about it, how important it was to talk about it, and how critical these conversations were. And I'd sat in these meetings and go, yeah, that's really important. At the same time thinking, I'm part of this problem. I'm sitting here saying, yes, we should talk about it, knowing at the time that I was hiding a diagnosis. And it got to a point where I thought, I can't, not that anyone should feel obliged to be open about it, but I got to the point where I started to feel a bit hypocritical. And then just one night on social media decided, almost on a whim, to just put a video out and say, I have bipolar disorder, and you know, but I feel a lot better about it now because I'm doing things like this, and I'm trying to get the message out there, and I'm trying to be open about it. And as you said, these are the stories. People need to know that anybody, people you've seen on the TV, people who live 2 doors down from you, can be suffering from this.
The stunning thing, couple stunning things for me about, I say coming out in quotes with my story, was that 2 things. One was, I thought I was afraid of the judgment, and I got the opposite. I got so much love. I don't know if that was for you, David, but I just
absolutely the same experience. In fact,
letters, phone calls,
Yeah, especially the way I did it on social media. We all know what sort of hate exists on social media, and I thought at least there'd be some, messages, particularly when somebody's in the media say, oh, it's all very well for you. But actually, overwhelmingly, everyone was so supportive, private messages and public, and everyone was so lovely.
And it was healing, right?
Absolutely.
It was so healing. Like, I felt like layers and layers of shame that I didn't know I was carrying were released. And I was like, wow, I feel lighter. I feel 10 years younger. It was so healing. And then the second healing thing was that I didn't know anybody with bipolar disorder. I didn't know anybody with walking around. We don't have it on our foreheads. And I have my own, internalized shame, thinking, okay, these are people who are, whatever, in the streets are not trustworthy. Well, instead, who do I meet? The people I said about in the film, Dr. David Guichon, Major General Martin, Professor, this one, that one, and the other one. Amazing human beings, yourself. And we keep meeting these amazing human beings. And all of a sudden, I'm part of this tribe that's creative and entrepreneurs and, BBC,
Have you found that just knowing about it has assisted? I always sort of compare it to, when you're in the throes of this disorder, that it's almost like being on a moving train. You can't really judge how fast the train opposite you is going because you're not in a stable position yourself. But do you find that you're just better at identifying the situation you're in after a diagnosis?
You mean when I'm in episode?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I think you know what you're in, but then the insidious sort of dynamic of this challenge is that when you are in a depressive episode, you can't remember ever having been well. I don't know if that was your case, David. It's like you can't believe your friends and your partners when they say, you're going to get better. We see you, we know we're here, and you don't believe it. Because I say it's the bipolar depression is lying to you, basically. And it's co-opted, it's hijacked your brain, and it's telling you you're never getting better. So there is that, Stop.
Absolutely. And I've been fortunate to have a good group, even before I was public about my diagnosis. I've been fortunate to have a good group of people around me who have sometimes almost physically dragged me out of bed and out of the house when I've just been curled up in a ball and not really been able to do anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, me too. And after the book was published, I had a number of people say, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. Well, I wasn't telling them. But then they'll say, what could I do? Or my cousin, my sister, my niece, my nephew, my brother is dealing with this. And I feel like a deer in the headlights. I don't know what to do. How can I help? And so I gave a TED talk and I came up with 4 things. I hope I remember the 4, if you want to hear them.
Yeah.
I call it my emergency mental health team toolkit, right? So the first thing is, and this reminded me what you just said, reach in. Don't expect them to reach out. They won't. You got to go drag them out of bed. You have to make the phone call. You have to show up because they feel they're in an island of shame and disaster, and they're not going to reach out to you because they don't think they're worth your time. So you got to reach in. That was thing 1. And then thing 2 was just listen. don't expect that you can fix it. You can't, right? Just don't try to fix it. But you're just listening provides a kind of, like, they're in an island of despair and you're listening and showing up is really a huge salve and a lifesaver. You know, so you just go for a walk with them, you just listen, don't try to fix it. But then the third thing for people who do need to do something, you know, like, but I got to do something. Well, here's what you can do. You can fill the freezer, you can take the kids to school, you can make the phone, you know, make the appointments, you can do the laundry. Because what people don't understand, I don't know if this is your case, David, for me, the cognitive dysfunction is so bad that I can't do any of that stuff.
Absolutely,
And they don't
yeah.
see it. I look just like I look now, probably, except for my hair won't be washed, you know, and I won't have a scarf on.
And I find it was a terrible spiral as well, because especially when I was living on my own, the inability to do those small things that you need in your life, like laundry, like kind of cleaning and self-care, that just makes the situation worse. You find you're living in a state that makes you feel even worse about it. As I think you said in your TED talk, then you don't want to invite people around because the place looks an absolute mess, and it's just this spiral that gets worse and worse and worse. It's really difficult to climb out of that.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the things that's really important to try to get across, is that when people think depression, they think, oh, she's sad, or, you know, but bipolar depression can have, and in my case has, and sounds like in yours, tremendous cognitive impact. Like, your brain isn't working. And people who want to help have to understand how incapacitating this is. Imagine they have a broken leg and you ask them to go for a run with you. They cannot, you know. So for me, all of that help was necessary. And I'm really lucky that I had my partner, my husband, Joe, was amazing when we were little kids at the time. And then other friends I have, and they figured it out that they needed a posse. And that's my fourth thing, that you got to have a posse. If you're a support, don't expect to do this alone, because you will burn out. So you got to gather the people, you know. And my friends, I'm really lucky to have a gang of women friends, and one of them was in charge, and she set up like a spreadsheet. And she's like, okay, you've got Monday, you've got Tuesday, you've got Wednesday, you've got Thursday, you're filling the freezer, you're taking her, you know, like all the very practical things, almost like it was a little kid or an elderly person. You have to assume that this person cannot do it.
These are the people we all need in our life that are so valuable.
Do. Yeah. And if you're a person in their life and you're wondering, what the heck can I do? Don't expect to fix it, right? You can't, but you can do all these practical things, and it makes a huge difference.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It really, really has been great to talk to you and just kind of share what we've been through in different countries and in different positions and in different ways. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
You're so welcome, David. Thank you.
Hey friends, thank you for still being here with us on World Bipolar Day. It's such an important day. You know, I know bipolar affects us every day of the year, let's face it. But there's something empowering about the 30th of March, because it's a day where we could actually, you know, push aside the stigmas and the shames and everything negative that we've ever felt, and actually feel empowered, feel inspired. The fact that we could come together in numbers to feel powerful, I think, and discuss bipolar, discuss how it affects us and our families and friends, but also the impact and the great things that come out of it, and the great things that Bipolar UK are doing as a charity, and all other charities and organizations and friends from around the world. So I really hope that today you feel that you're also a part of that, and just want to thank you for being here. If you are watching on the playback link, then hello. Thank you for being here. I'm glad you're catching up with us. That's the main thing. It's better late than never. And I hope that everything you've heard so far has been rewarding and enriching. I hope it's inspired you and, you know, made you think about some things. And also, if you are struggling, if you feel like maybe, you know, you're here because you're a bit curious, you're thinking, oh, maybe I've got bipolar symptoms, I'm not sure, let me go and figure it out. And maybe that's what's brought you here today. Then you know what? There is more information for you here with us, but also online. bipolaruk.org, plenty of information pages as well. And I personally would recommend you tapping in to the e-community. So it's an online community of people with bipolar, although with lived experiences, maybe their friends, family, you know, people like that, who all come together. They talk about various things, and you could speak as yourself, you could speak anonymously, but it means that you could tap into a community of people who really should understand you and will understand you. So you know that you're not in this journey alone. So really, we're almost at the end. We're almost at the end. I can't believe it. It's flown by already. Another big thank you to Sara and David and everybody else who's spoken so far. I'm about to hand over to Simon and another fellow ambassador, legend, Nicky Chin. I call him a legend because I think this gentleman is incredibly amazing. I love Nicky, honestly, I really do. He's a songwriter, a record producer. He has a long-standing career going all the way back from the 70s and 80s. And what I love about Nicky, because I've been so fortunate to speak with him one-on-one on a few occasions, such a lovely, lovely, inspirational man. I just love the fact of how he's been able to watch the change, I guess, in how people view bipolar. He'll tell you himself, when he was first diagnosed, it was called manic depression. And there was literally nobody around him that, you know, looked like him, so to speak. Nobody who had the condition that he knew of. Nobody spoke about it. It was brushed under the carpet. And he just had to, I guess, get on with it, right? There weren't no peer support groups. There wasn't any Bipolar UK charity. And yet he navigated, and yet here he is, still here to tell the tale. And that's why I find him so incredibly, incredibly inspiring. And Nicky would tell you himself how just watching over the years, the resources and the support that's come about, he will say, you know, there's still a long way to go, but there's definitely change that has been made. So Nicky, thank you for all your hard work and all your representation as well. It's just incredible to have you as part of the charity, and it's incredible to know you too. So before I hand over to Simon and Nicky for the closing comments, I want to give you a big thank you. This is every single person who got involved with Bipolar UK's campaign last year. Okay, so in October 2023, on World Mental Health Day, Bipolar UK launched a campaign, and they asked many of us, all of us, whoever saw the message, to write to their local MP and speak to their local MP about the importance of bipolar, right? Sorry, I'm making noise. I'm making noises. For quicker diagnosis and specialist care, right? This was something that we found was super important. And actually the whole point of Bipolar UK, the whole point of this campaign was to engage with as many MPs as possible. Because we've had MPs come into some of our events, we've had MPs speaking, and they say, yeah, we're going to help, or yeah, it's really important. And then we don't hear from them again. So Bipolar UK made a concerted effort to ask you, the people, us, to speak to our local MPs and to, you know, to get them to listen, to hear us. And so we wrote to them, you wrote to them. And in fact, over 170 MPs are now engaging with Bipolar UK. That is simply because of you. Before you wrote those letters, before you sent those letters out, the interaction was minimal. It was much smaller. Since your letters, since you reaching out to your MPs, since using your voice and amplifying the message of, you know, faster diagnosis and access to specialist care, there are now over 170 MPs engaging with Bipolar UK, speaking with them, lobbying with them, campaigning with them, and actually connecting and saying, right, this is what I can do and this is how I can help. And that to me is incredible. So it really goes to show how speaking up and speaking out, how representing bipolar community and amplifying our voices, it actually works. So thank you. And in fact, to prove it, check this out.
My name is Angela Rayner, and I'm the Deputy Leader of the UK Labour Party, and I'm proud to support World Bipolar Day, to support efforts to encourage greater understanding about what bipolar is and isn't, and help to banish the stigma. More than 1 million people live with bipolar in the UK. More than 5 million friends and family are significantly affected by a loved one's bipolar. Someone with bipolar takes their own life every day. I've been open about the impact of living with bipolar on my own family. I hope talking about it more will help raise awareness, so more people can get the diagnosis, treatment and support that they need. On World Bipolar Day, I'm sending my best wishes to the bipolar community, and I'm committed to playing my part in helping to make the world a more bipolar-friendly place.
I'm sending best wishes to the bipolar community on World Bipolar Day. My name is Abhina Pangsari, and I'm the Shadow Minister for Women's Health and Mental Health, and I want to offer a commitment to ensuring that the workplace is bipolar friendly.
I'm sending my best wishes to the bipolar community on Bipolar Day. I'm committed to creating a world which is more bipolar friendly.
Hi there, my name's Ian Levy. I'm the Member of Parliament for Blythe Valley in Northumberland. Prior to being elected as a Member of Parliament in 2019, I worked for nearly 30 years at a mental health setting at St Nicholas' Hospital and St George's Hospital in Newcastle and in Morpeth. In that time, I dealt with a lot of people who suffered from bipolar, and this is a really debilitating illness. It's something that affects people on a daily basis. I would ask everybody who suffers from bipolar or has family members who are suffering from bipolar, because when you have bipolar, it affects not just the one person, it affects all the other members of the family as well, the siblings, the parents, the grandparents, the children. Go and get some help, talk to somebody, speak to a counsellor. Help is out there. You don't have to suffer alone.
Most of us will know someone, though we might not know it, who is bipolar. And although treatments have got much better in recent years for this condition, bipolar sufferers themselves and their loved ones can face real challenges. So I'm happy to do whatever I can to make the world a better place for bipolar people.
Hello, I'm Gareth Davis, Member of the Senedd or Welsh Parliament here in Cardiff, and I'm sending my best wishes to everyone in the bipolar community today on World Bipolar Day. And I'm committed in my role here in the Senedd, Welsh Parliament, as an MS, to making the world a more bipolar friendly place, that we can all feel safe in our communities and also in wider society as well. So wishing you all a very happy World Bipolar Day.
Thank you. It's really brilliant to be joined at the very end of our virtual conference by Nikki Chin. Nikki, so I know you've been following all evening, haven't you? I mean, we've been hearing about the importance of thriving in the workplace, and you were one of the first people publicly to talk about their bipolar and to have a very successful career. I mean, everyone's heard of your music. Those of you who might not have heard your name, but certainly everyone who's on the call now will have heard of a number of your songs that you wrote. So it's just great to have you on. And just to kind of recap in terms of some of the things that we've been hearing today, it is possible to live well bipolar. It is possible for people with bipolar to be able to thrive well in the workplace. It's never easy. It is really challenging. It needs a lot. People do need support and a bit of extra help. But some of that, the flexible working, that's stuff that benefits and applies to everyone as well. So people with bipolar shouldn't feel that they themselves at all separate from all the other really positive initiatives at the moment which are going on to make the workplace more inclusive. Also, it's fantastic. I think over the last year we've been able to get so much more profile for bipolar and to get it heard in the corridors of power, because that's really critical to be able to make sure that people with bipolar have the support in terms of specialist treatment and support, including peer support, but also to just get on that first step. That very first step to getting a diagnosis, which is really critical. Anyone who's watching tonight who thinks they might have bipolar, go to our webpage, Could It Be Bipolar? And that will be able to help you on your journey by just sharing some of your symptoms and using our mood disorder questionnaire. But also you've heard about all of the politicians who are now on board, and really pleased that we're having some really constructive discussions as well with civil servants and also with NHS England and some of the devolved administrations as well. So We're making progress. We're not as far as we should be, but we've got to start somewhere. And I just wanted to say, before I hand over to Nikki, a massive thank you to all of you who are working with us to be able to try to make a bipolar-friendly world a reality. Nikki, now.
Yeah.
Are you there? How are you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. And you?
Fantastic. A bit sore from my long walk. I'm looking forward to hearing from yourself, Nikki, about everything you've done to be able to live well with bipolar, really, and to achieve your dreams.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm handing over to you, Nikki.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm not going to sort of talk about living my dreams too much today, more than Bipolar UK. Yeah, I mean, Bipolar UK brings our community together every year on World Bipolar Day to help encourage understanding of the condition and to help challenge stigma. Stigma is having a lot less success than it did in the past. Compared to when I was first diagnosed at the age of 16, people are talking about mental health with a much more positive and open mind, but there's still a long way to go. Stigma needs to be part of a broader and louder conversation. Well, that's down to us. We need to expose it for what it is, inform people of its sinister motives, its humiliating implications, its destructive bigotry. That's why days like these are so valuable. We need to apply the same approach to bipolar itself. We must all play our part in getting the condition into a more open and accessible discussion and into the public consciousness. People need to know more about bipolar, and we need to tell them. I tell a lot of people I have bipolar. I don't have a problem with it, and so far neither do they. I've never had a negative response. I'm not referring to the workplace. I don't pretend to be an expert on that. Actually, I don't pretend to be an expert on anything. But songwriters don't have bosses. So the workplace, I don't know too much about. But I know telling others can feel risky. It's that fear of stigma again. But I really did want to tell people. I didn't want to live pretending to be someone I wasn't. I didn't want to pretend I was well when I wasn't. I didn't want to live a life of secrecy. Then I realized something. It didn't have to be a risk at all. It was down to me who I chose to tell in the first place. My choice, my judgment, no real risk. Or if I wanted to take a risk, well, that was my decision too. And while talking about it, people got to know the real me a lot better. And I was promoting awareness of bipolar at the same time. Overall, pretty good deal. Well, there's nothing secret about my next topic, donations. They are vital to any charity, and Bipolar UK is no different. Can you make one today? Or do you know anyone who can? Ask people you know well, who you think will be sympathetic to the cause. What's the best thing that can happen when you ask for a donation? The person says yes, accompanied by a lovely smile. And the worst thing? The person says no, accompanied by a disapproving scowl. Not really very generous. It doesn't matter. You did the right thing. You asked. You will get a lot more yeses than you will nos if you choose who you ask. And there's always bound to be some cynic, isn't there, demanding to know how bipolar use the donations. Do they spend it sensibly? Well, I suppose that's a good question. Well, here's a good answer. £10 helps someone get peer support from our e-community. And here's another good answer. £50 helps someone get peer support via our callback or email service. These services are vital to people with mood disorder who are struggling. I wish there had been a Bipolar UK when I was first unwell, but there wasn't. But there is now, and it needs money to keep on doing what it is doing. Every single pound counts. Any donation will mean Bipolar UK can help more people in need than ever before. When everything seems at its most confusing and its most difficult, Bipolar UK is there. It can help and it does help. But as we know, it is a charity and it does rely on donations, on people's generosity. However, please only make a donation if you are currently well and if you have the means to do so. That's important. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Nikki. Very grateful for that. We always want to run these conferences for free and provide as good quality content as possible. So if you have really valued what you've heard this evening, and then do, just if you want to say thank you, then as Nikki said, do it through a donation, which you've got it is coming up there on the ticker tape there, or you can just go to bipolaruk.org. But thanks, Nikki. That's incredibly generous for you to share that and for the ask as well for the community. So it's always a pleasure to be on a virtual conference and also in-person conferences. We do many together, don't we? So
indeed, and it's always a pleasure to be with you and to represent Bipolar UK.
Thanks, Nikki. So just to get the poll results up there at the very end, before I hand back to Leah, we asked you whether your workplace was supportive or not. It's about 50-50. So 25% say yes, workplace is supportive. 24% no. So we've got a lot of progress to be made. We need to make there, but some good stuff happening. But most people have said, or the largest one, not most, a third, have said that they do sometimes help. So it's a mixed picture. There's a lot of work we still need to do, but there's lots of positive things that we can build on. Over to you, Leah. Thank you, everybody, for joining this evening. And I'm going to hand you back now to the wonderful Leah. Leah, do you want to tell people what's coming up next for our Bipolar Week webinar?
Well, that's it. I can't believe we're almost at the end of the conference. Thank you once again to Simon, our CEO of Bipolar UK, and of course the fabulous Nikki Chin. What a legend that man is. Such an edge. It's great to have you, Nikki. So that's it. That's it for this year's World Bipolar Day conference, courtesy of Bipolar UK. I hope that it's been insightful. Don't forget, if you do need help, advice, support, or you are in crisis, there's information going at the bottom of the screen. You can also tap into bipolaruk.org, which is the all-important website. You'll also find on there the online e-community and, of course, information on how you can find a peer support group in your area. So there is still one more webinar in celebration of World Bipolar Day. One more and very important webinar. It's on Tuesday. It's with me. I'm hosting it. It's my webinar, but I'm not by myself. You'll be pleased to know. I've got a whole panel with me, including BAFTA award-winning actor and director Adam Deacon. It's going to be so great to have him in discussion with me, Dr. Samir, and Paul Wiseman as well. We are going to be talking about advanced choice documents. Now, have you heard about this? Everyone's talking about it at the moment. If you haven't heard of advanced choice documents, or ACDs for short, they're basically a document like a will that you write when you're well, okay? And you write it about the treatment you would like, the things that you would like in place should you ever become unwell with your mental health, or if you have a relapse and you end up being hospitalized. So basically, it's like your instructions, your roadmap, because nobody knows ourselves better than us, right? And so if we're in an unfortunate case where we have a relapse, then people should really listen to us when we're well, and we know what works for us and what doesn't. But the thing is, it's not as straightforward as that. There's so much to discuss. Like, for example, who helps us to write these documents? Can we do it by ourselves? Is it worth doing? Is it worth the paper it's written on? Because if I write this and then I end up in hospital, God forbid, will my requests be adhered to? And all of this and more, such an important, really important discussion. I hope you'll be there. If you haven't got your free tickets to join us on Tuesday, then please do that now. Come and join us. It's lunchtime. It's about 12:30, I believe, 12 o'clock, 12:30. It's on the screen, I'm sure, right now. I will be there. I'll know the time by then, I promise. And I hope you'll be there as well with myself and the crew to discuss that, because I think it's super important. But until then, my friends, on World Bipolar Day 2024, what so happens to be Easter weekend, thank you for being here. Happy World Bipolar Day, if there is such a thing, if we could call it that. But I am choosing to say happy because it's a time of us all coming together as a tribe to amplify our voices and to be heard, to put bipolar on the map so that people can hear our voices and know that actually we need more support, earlier intervention, access to specialist care, obviously just tearing down that stigma and all the other real horrible parts of it, but also just letting other people, especially people who are new to this journey, you know, letting them know that there are other people just like you, other people with bipolar who live with it and who still do well. So there is life after diagnosis. Thank you to all of you for watching today and for being part of this. Thank you to all the amazing speakers, the great interviews. Thank you for getting involved with the poll as well. Remember, if you do want to get in touch with Bipolar UK, you can do that. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. Sign up to our newsletter as well. Join our e-community, find a peer support group in your area, all of that jazz. And thank you as well to everyone at Bipolar UK. They are a small charity making a big impact, and the work you're doing makes me so proud, guys. Thank you to Simon and Rosie, and to Sarah, and to everybody else on the team. Until next year, my friends, I will see you then. But for the rest of you, I will also see you on Tuesday for the chat on the ACD Advanced Choice Documents webinar. So until then, take care and good night.